Good morning and welcome back to part 4 of reviving the cheapest running 911 in the world, or the UK, or South Wales, or this workshop. It's a Sunday, so it's nice and quiet in the workshop, nice and quiet outside. Hopefully has been some BMWs with pop and bang maps running around outside, so hopefully we'll avoid them. Just walk my dogs. My wife has popped into her business for an hour, so I've got a clear hour just to do a little bit of work and, more importantly, do an update video on where we are with the car. So let's dive right in. So as we said in the intro, you join us back underneath the car. A few things have happened since last time. As you can see, we've got a new gear selection cable fitted, and that moves freely and the car goes into park, drive, reverse and neutral, as it should do. Underneath, we've removed one of the cross braces. There's one still on there, the other cross brace, so that we've got a nice angle of attack for the snapped bolts that were in the gearbox sump. We've actually extracted those bolts or drilled those bolts through and already tapped them. I know a few people are asking us to do a video on that, but you know, basically we sort of grabbed half an hour between a customer's job when we were waiting for some parts and did that job. So that where you can see there's the 5 bolts that are back in the sump, those are the 5 that were snapped. I will talk you through how we do it though. You know, it isn't rocket science. It is a little bit awkward when you're drilling up from underneath. You know, ideally you'd be drilling holes like this, either with a jig or you know, with the gearbox spun round the other way on a pillar drill or something, but you know, it is what it is. So the way we go about it is laid the tools out that we've used. So first of all, if the bolt is snapped off proud of the case, we just flatten it off with a small wheel so that it's flush with the case. Then we use a center punch. I'm a fan of these spring-loaded center punches to give us a nice central punch hole to start with. Then we use a good quality cobalt drill. I use these DeWalt Extreme ones. We've bought cobalt drills off the internet and you know, they haven't lasted 5 seconds. So we buy these locally just from Screwfix. They're not cheap, but they last well, especially if you use them with like a compound, cutting compound. It helps them last a little bit longer. So yeah, so if they're proud of the case, we flatten them off with a wheel so they're nice and flat, center punch them, start off with a small drill, work up to the correct size drill for the tap hole. It's not actually a 0.6, just put that packet there for reference. Correct size drill for the tap hole, then good quality tap, and tap through, and that's how we've done all 5. One of them wandered off slightly, because the challenge when you're doing this, always use a good drill as well. Good drill, good torque drill on a slow speed. So we use that on about half speed. The challenge with these is that because the case material is considerably softer than the material that you're drilling into, the drill wants to wander off into the soft material because it's easier, passage of least resistance. So that's the challenge all the time. One of them's wandered off slightly. We think we're going to get away with it actually, being as it's you know, it's only securing the sump onto the bottom of the case, and there's a gasket in the mix as well. If we don't, we'll just TIG it up and then re-drill it. So it's not a big deal. The only other thing to say is that if the bolt snaps off and the head of where it's snapped is below the level of the case, what we do is we use one of these little die grinder. So we go into the hole and we just dish the top of the bolt slightly with a die grinder, so that then when we start drilling into the bolt, we're drilling nice and centrally into the dish, and then the same thing, nice good quality tap, and tap them out. So we have all of the sump bolts now sorted, ready to go back on. Apologies for the use of the old bolts in this video. This segment of the video we hadn't actually picked up the sump, the filter, the new bolts from Porsche in Cardiff. So the next thing we're going to do is clean up that mating face, and then we're going to pop to Porsche Cardiff, pick up the parts, go through the refilling procedure, which I'll do a short segment of this video on, and we will see if this car starts and drives. So a couple of things to get straight into. Yesterday we popped up to Porsche Cardiff. We were doing a parts run for customer cars for next week. So we picked up our parts for the gearbox service, a little bit more than the gearbox service because we were replacing, you know, the sump and things as well. So everything genuine Porsche. The reason why we do that, sort of some people say, oh, you know, why don't you buy the kits from OP Oils? Well, what we found with the kits from OP Oils is they're great and they're good value, but they don't always come complete. So for instance, when you buy the filter from OP Oils, you don't tend to get this guy here, which is the pickup part of the sump. You have to take it off your old one. We get the filling spout, new magnets in the sump. We've got new fill and drain plugs and gaskets and seals, and we got new bolts because lots of those were rounded on the original sump, rusty, horrible, and obviously a new gasket. Before we dive into fitting that, we're going to show you a few tips on fitting that. We said we were going to, warts and all, we're going to tell you everything about how much the build cost. So, over to our whiteboard. This is where we are currently with the car and the project. As you can see, quickly talk you through it. The car cost us £5,000. The delivery to get it from Dorset was £230 on a flatbed lorry. The gear cable cost us £295.81. Gearbox parts so far that we bought, which we just showed you, have been £349.03. Gives us a grand total, running total so far, of £5,874.84. We've got to order some fluid. Annoyingly, I thought we had the correct fluid in stock. Didn't actually check, just assumed we had. And actually, we've only got the fluid for the later gearbox. It's quite expensive and it takes quite a lot of fluid. So we tend not to always keep it in stock. We can get it next day. So we'll be getting the fluid, and we are getting that from OP Oils. So give them a little bit of a plug. So that's where we are on the build cost. I think probably best if we now switch to back underneath the car. I'll see you there. So you really do join us under the car. I'm not quite sure how this perspective of shot is going to work, but let's have a go. So we've prepped the sump ready to go on. We've prepped the mating surfaces and we've fitted the new filter. Just a little bit of clean gearbox oil on the O-ring of the filter, push it on, and then it's held on with two little Torx head screws. So just make sure that they're kept up nicely, which they are. And then we've prepped the sump, and what we've done to make it less fiddly, we always do this little tip. As you can see the sump, you might be able to see there's just a couple of cable ties holding the gasket on in the right place. And then after we've got a couple of bolts in loosely, we'll snip the cable ties and they will come off, but it holds the gasket properly in place just as we ease a couple of bolts finger tight into the sump, which is always easier said than done. It's a bit upstarted. That one's not wanting to go in. Let's try a different one. We've got one started there. Let's get one started over the other side. two started there, and we'll go for a couple either end. Once we got those in, we know we've got the gasket in the right place. The gasket's not going to move anywhere, so then we'll snip off the 4 little cable ties that we've put there to keep the gasket in the right place. And then, I'm not going to show it all, we're just going to do up the rest of the screws and put in the sump plug, obviously not the fill plug because we've got to fill the sump with fluid, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we should be ready to go. So what you'll notice there is that the car was running a little bit rough, has got an engine management light on, showing a misfire on cylinder 6 and an O2 sensor on bank 2 as well, so probably related. We'll get into that in the next video. But what you can see, hopefully, is that it selects drive as you accelerate through the rev range. The gears change smoothly with no clunks all the way up to 5th, and then as you decelerate they come back down again, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then into neutral and turn the engine off. So fairly successful from that perspective. We still do have a few things going on. We have a leak from the gearbox sump still, unfortunately, where one of the bolts that we repaired won't do up fully and is spinning, so we need to sort that out. May need to take the sump back off again, hopefully we won't, but all in all we're pretty happy with that as a test drive. The reason why we test drove it like that with the wheels jacked up off the ground was actually because the braking system needs some work. The long brake pipe that goes across the front of the car from the distribution block on the left hand side over to the caliper flexi on the right hand side has rotted away. And that's the leak that we got on the braking system. So that's why we're not actually test driving it. So going to order some more parts, drop the subframe, drop the steering rack, replace the steering rack hard lines which rot as well, and that brake pipe. So that's it for the test drive. Okay, well, I think that's it. We'll call that a wrap for this video for the cheapest running and driving 996 in the world, maybe. Thanks very much again for watching. We'll continue the updates. I think the next video is going to be problem solving on that gearbox leak that we talked about, sorting the brake-in system out and doing some other bits where we got the subframe and the suspension disconnected. A couple of bits of suspension looking a little bit tired, and a couple of brake pipes, so we're going to change those, and fingers crossed we might actually pull it out of the workshop under its own steam during the next video. Thanks very much again. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe, and you'll get a notification of the next video. Thanks again.